The term front line as well, is that kind of like the front where it all kind of started?
Yeah, the front line's on the front line where the soldiers are. That's why you had, you know, in the war you have the front line for the soldiers. So street dealers are classified as the soldiers. So, you know, when you're on the front line, that's where it was. Everyone had their territory and held their ground. And what happened was, on the night of the riots, it was absolutely mad because you had on the corner there where that boutique hotel is, used to be the petrol station. This here was where the Four Aces nightclub used to be. They created these stones, which are long overdue.
Wow.
Lloydie Coxon, who was resident here at the Four Aces, and obviously George Brightley, Sir George Sound System, great Josh Shucker, who was also here. It was mad because Newton showed us this part of the building that I didn't know existed, because it used to be a circus originally, 18th century. At the height of it all going off, it was a whole big thing, and the Daily Mail would come up with the word yardie. It was started right here, that word. It was created from the papers, yeah. Rankin Dread, the notorious Rankin Dread, used to perform on Coxon Sound System at the Four Aces, and so this has great significance. Back then, this was the introduction to what would be classified as the very first existence of sound system. Owners, you know, Chris Sullivan from the Wag Club, he used to come down with groups of people. Philip Salon, who's done the Mud Club, corner of Mount Pleasant.
So this is where
so
the
this is
action
their warehouse. This was the warehouse. Yeah. What he was doing was, when he was getting all his bin bags of money coming, he was craftily taking money and pushing it up, and it's still holding the ceiling. And he said the next morning, when he ran back upstairs, there was a mountain of money like that. The police was so disturbed by the amount of people going to be turning up, they had a police car and a police car there with police giving out flyers.
You ready, Andy? We're going to go on a little walkabout now.
Yep. Ready time, ready, Steve? Let's go.
Let's go and check out a few of the old haunts.
Yeah.
Andy, we're going to go on a little walkabout today in a few really important locations. Quickly tell me about a couple of these locations very quickly where we're going to be going.
Well, the first one is really significant. This is Amherst Road, a very well-known road in Stoke Newington. Across the road, the building we're looking at there used to actually be associated with the Craig twins.
Really? Should we go and check it? Let's go and check it out.
Come.
What was it called? The Regency?
It used to be called the Regency. This club actually wasn't theirs. It was owned by some brothers called the Barry brothers. One of them went to prison related to the murder of Jack the Hat. He'd brought a gun to Everingham Road to one of the twins. On the night he was fatally stabbed to death, Jack the Hat, and obviously shit came rolling down on them all. So
this was where the Regency Club was?
Yeah, see this? 240 Amherst Road. So right here, it's kind of strange because the actual doorway, the archway you'll see, hasn't changed. Even though the building's now been converted into flats, as I said, the actual doorway, the entrance has stayed exactly the same. Yeah. The club changed hands in the 70s, beginning of the 70s. A fella who had a second-hand shop, West Indian guy, Vin, he bought the place and he basically turned it into one of the first Afro-Caribbean clubs. Sons, I think it was Danny, yeah, the eldest one, who really ran it, and Glenn, who I knew very well, who sadly died in a car accident, used to run a sound system. Danny Casanova was one of the sound systems, and Glenn obviously, when the name changed, Phoebe's to Willows, then to Trends, and Glenn had a sound called Trends, and we played in Mellow Magic. We played a couple of sound clashes with Glenn, God rest his soul. But yeah, it's very, very historic in that. You had Joe Shucker, who used to play here. He was one of the main sound systems of the time, certainly legendary Joe Shucker, and other systems will play. So you had exclusively Lovers Rock being played. I think it was in the basement, which was Casanova.
Where was it? What down here?
Upstairs, yeah. So you had 3 floors. It's huge building.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, as I said to you in the cab, I'm blown away by the actual size of this. I'll tell you what. Let's stand back here because
to look at its grandeur. It really is an amazing building.
This place is absolutely massive.
Yeah. If you look at the full grandeur of it as well, it's an absolutely amazing building.
How many people would you say this would have helped?
God, you used to pack it to the rafters, and to be quite honest, I couldn't even give you a exact figure because, you know, licensing laws back then were completely almost non-existent. So even though they should have existed, as I said, you've done as you please. You literally fit people in like sardines. But one of the pitiful things, I think there should be a blue plaque on this place
100%.
because there's so much history on this building alone. And as I said, it's fine, you know, cleaning it up and turning it into flats, but the history that is left behind as part of Stoke Newton's history, sort of London's history and club history, given the association with the Craig twins, as I said, who actually, you know, this was their sort of haunt, you know, people believed they owned it. But they didn't live far from it. They actually lived on Casanoff Road. Yeah, they lived on Cedar Court.
Yeah.
A lot of people still, you know, associate them with Bethnal Green, but I think this was probably even more so their stomping ground, you know. But yeah, this was just a great landmark. But then it became, at the time it became Willows, it then started to fuse the whole thing in the whole kind of yardie culture, as they got it described. The whole word got tapped down at the 4 races of people who were going there. And then it opened up into a front line. So the front line basically started right here.
Just over there,
across
wasn't
the road.
Sandringham Road?
Yeah, so the off licence was there. As I said, it changed hands numerous times, so not to be, you know, associated now with what used to go on back then. But it started there. There's dominant drug dealing for people from the club, obviously, were outside selling drugs. And then Scobie Road there is where it started, and it splintered off up onto Arcota Street. But what made it more significant was the, you know, couple of mile stretch which then led right the way down onto Sandringham Road, which officially got, you know, classified as the front line, you know. And we'll take a trip down to Sandringham Road and we'll talk about the history of that as well.
The term front line as well, is that kind of like the front where it all kind of started?
Yeah, the front line's on the front line where the soldiers are. That's why you had, you know, in the war you have the front line for the soldiers.
Ah.
So street dealers are classified as the soldiers. So, you know, when you're on the front line, that's where it was.
That's
Everyone had
started.
their territory and held their ground.
Because you had front lines obviously in Notting Hill, All Saints Road as
Brixton,
well,
All
wasn't it?
Saints Road,
Brixton.
you had them all, yeah. So, you know, there's a front line in a lot of these areas, not just in obviously London as well. You've got front line areas in Liverpool, Bristol, you know, Birmingham.
That is historical, Andy. I love that. Well, listen, I'll tell you what. Let's go and check out, maybe go Sandringham Road now. Tell me about, you know, Sandringham Road. This road is huge, isn't it? Look how long it is.
So this road was the front line. Every couple of feet, every couple of feet, there was a hustler who would be standing outside selling, you know, crack, heroin, cocaine, dominantly weed. All these, you know, these little houses here. Do you know what I mean? People would be standing up outside, literally in the people's front garden gates, you know. As I said, it really was just, you know, a sort of combustion of people and madness. But when we come up to this little kind of crossing in the road, this is where it already, you know, sort of took place. You'll see the houses now, the magnificent grandeur of them all.
These houses are huge. Look
These
at the
are
size
amazing houses. These are multi-million-pound houses now. You've got to understand, virtually the vast majority of these were actually owned by Windrush generation, you know, West Indians coming here. My mum was instrumental in helping a lot of people get onto that property ladder through the pardon system she ran, you know. But people looked for big houses because they had, you know, families, you know, and they wanted to, you know, send for relatives, and they had friends who would stay there until they found their way on the property ladder.
Not being funny, but these houses are on like, what are they, 1, 2, 3, they're on 4 levels because you've got you've got a basement.
Yeah.
And then you got the 3 levels above.
4-storey these houses are, and I mean, when I say 4 stories, I mean the rooms are absolutely massive. These were all the old Victorian properties, and strangely enough, you have a few properties here along here that they used to obviously have blues dances in as well. You know, there are a couple of properties along here which, you know, every single Saturday night, you know, there'd be sound systems, chicken. People like that would be putting, you know, their sound system in, and they'd be literally, you know, filled to the rafters.
Wow.
And obviously there's a junction with Ridley Road Market. Down the bottom where we would explore is where they filmed Top Boy. This was, you know, I can't even start to describe it. As I said, this was the front line, you know, and it's completely unrecognisable to what it is now, but you could get anything down there, not just drugs, you know, checkbook and cards, stolen property, you know, weapons, It all happened on this front line, but it also was the trigger point for the 1981 riots that hit Stoke Newington and Dalston, and right here where we are now was obviously, one of the most controversial sort of parts. So we'll have a little walk down to what was used to be the Johnson's Cafe.
So basically, Andy, we're on the, I suppose, the epicentre of the front line. This is where it kind of all evolved down this end of Sandringham Road. Yeah,
this is where it all did properly kick off. It was building up for a little while. I remember like a week before, before the actual major disturbances, there was an incident. There used to be the Cubies Club, which was on the side of the Four Aces, and about 100 people come out of there one night. And then they decided to sort of congregate on the high street. They smashed out the jeweller's window.
So the high street is literally just down there,
literally just there. We'll walk up there, yeah. And they smashed the Kentucky Fried Chicken window, stole the till, and looted a few of the shops, And that happened a week prior, but tension was building and building and building until it got to the absolute climax. And that's down there, we'll show you, which was
let's have a little walkabout.
Yeah. So along here now was more or less where everything used to happen. This was the corner hub of the front line, used to congregate around here. What obviously used to be Johnson's Cafe right there on the corner.
So this was Johnson's Cafe you was telling me about?
This here was Johnson's Cafe.
Which
back
one?
then.
Which
this
one?
The building has a hair and beauty place. And next door to it was All Nations Barber Shop. And I'll never forget, because the police really had it in for Johnson's, because people hang around there, they used to raid it all regularly. And what happened was, on the night of the riots, it was absolutely mad, because you had on the corner there where that boutique hotel is, used to be the petrol station, and the police were guarding it, ferociously because of the petrol bombs, People were getting petrol bombs, and even the Argus, which is closed down now, but that got looted. I mean, literally, people went in there, I remember, and they went upstairs to where the conveyor belt was, and someone turned on the belt, and they let all the stuff was coming down, and literally they cleaned the place out. Every single item that they had in stock was gone. And then obviously the police got so frustrated by the congregation at Johnson's, they actually smashed in all the windows with truncheons. So they went and attacked the place and banged out every window, kicked in the glass thing. And obviously the police then tried to charge it. So they came down here with the helmets and the shields.
They would have been coming down.
The police came down here, maybe 100 police was coming down, and all the youth had built up. So basically the youth pushed back at them, and they ended up having to tell fucking run the police, which was completely embarrassing for the old Bill as well, but it was really, very, very, the tension was, it was unbelievable how it was all going down. The petrol station was here.
Petrol garage was there.
So that was basically that corner there, the petrol station, that it took over. And then when you come down here was the Rio Cinema. So the Rio...
What, down there on the corner?
Right here. So basically what happened was all the youth had built up along this road. It was literally packed 3 deep with people. So you had everyone stacked up going right down the road. Then across the road now along this side you had all the police. So it was literally as far as you could see, police running all this way, all armed up with their riot shields, their helmets, and you had all the youth stretched right the way along from Dalston Junction right the way down past Stoke Newington, and obviously the shops here, you had Grant's, which was expensive shoes, you had certain shops along there that people have been targeting during the week to go in and loot. People even took orders for some of the stuff they were going to nick,
Tell us about this spot here.
So this is a very, very famous spot. This here was where the Four Aces nightclub used to be. So the Four Aces, as I said, was the mecca for actually the home of Lovers Rock. This is where it was born, when Louisa Marks sang Caught You in a Lie for a talent contest done by Lloydie Coxon. Dennis Bovell, one guy we talked about, one of the produced a lot of music for Babylon, and obviously produced Janet Kay and other artists in Lovers Rock. He sang and played out Sufferers, High Power. My very good friend Newton Dunbar, he moved the club on with Charlie Collins, late Charlie Collins, and obviously the club beside it, which ran along the side road, was Cubies, which was this designated club. But if we look here, and they've done the right thing as well, they've created these stones, which are long overdue.
Wow.
Lloydie Coxon, who was resident here at the Four Oases, and obviously George Brightly, Sir George Sound System, great Josh Shucker, who was also here, you know.
Wow.
Obviously, Black Slate, one of the original people here. My good friend, God rest his soul, Newton Dunbar, and Louisa Marks. You got Joe from Labyrinth.
Joe Labyrinth, yeah.
Fat Man Sound System. You had the Mighty Chicken, another sound system. Notorious Blues Party organisation they were. Old Charlie Collins, Sir Collins Sound System. And of course Louisa Marks.
It's incredible. They've captured all the history within here as well, wasn't it?
Because this was so important, basically, because this is a landmark, you know, in Hackney, and should never be forgotten. You know, people sacrificed a lot to be here, and you know, put our music on the map. And I said the Four Oases was one of those places, you know, and I mean, it went for it all. Believe me.
Where was the door to the Four Oases?
On the front. So basically, along the door. When you go along the front, along the high street, it was on the right hand side next door to a carpet shop.
And how many people would Labyrinth or the Four Oases hold?
Labyrinth opened up, so the Four Oases originally used to be a tiny little drinking club called Rambling Rose. There was a car auction before that. It was a huge building, and the front was the Four Aces, which became a sound system basically club. That's what it was known as. You had Shucker, you had Java, Fat Man. You know, you see the sounds that played there. But along the side, I remember Newton telling me, he one day had a thought, and anyway, they were there, and along the side, they decided they were going to open up a Pacific club, which became Cubies, and that ran around Rosemary Avenue. So that was along the side of it, and that's where Sir George played. And then what happened was, after that, when Joe came there in the actually the early 90s, Joe moved into the club, and they opened the whole lot up basically. So that was then purely for, which was Happy Hardcore, Acid, and later Drum and Bass. And yeah, they opened the whole club completely. So it was a huge building, but it's a fraction of the club. Again, in the book, a great description when I turn up on day here with Barry McIntosh, who was a big R&B promoter, and we had LL Cool J. He'd managed to, obviously, he'd had an agreement contract with him, and we were looking for a venue. It was New Year's Eve 1996 or 97, and it was mad because Newton showed us this part of the building that I didn't know existed, because it used to be a circus originally, 18th century. So it was literally the length of this road almost, the building. It went back. It was a massive structure, but some great years here. I remember as a kid coming down here, you know, 15 years old, we used to sneak down to the Aces, you know, shouldn't have been in there. We used to go in there, get fried chicken, I used to cook down there, and then Kurt, who I knew very well, used to run a thing called a Hideaway in the basement, and that was a real little spieler. They used to do gambling down there, and it was, yeah, a lot of memories, you know. It goes back a long way.
A lot of good memories.
A lot of good memories growing up, you know. As I said, it was long before the gentrification of all Hackney and how it sort of turned upside down. You know, we didn't have a lot, but we had each other back then, you know what I mean? It was a proper community, yeah.
So very, very important place.
Significant, yeah.
And now it looks like it's a library there now.
Yeah, library there, and obviously the station has come about, and that was the whole generation process that changed it all.
It must have been such a vibe around here, though.
It was, but this was Dalston Lane. Let me take you to Dalston Lane, because this is where it all happened on a Saturday. So along this strip was where you had M&D Records, you had High Tech, which was used to sell the sound equipment, the amplifiers, needles, you know, microphones, all the cables. You had Elvin's next door to them, and then you had further along the strip, you know, you had Johnson & Jones. But what's interesting is they tried to revive this and not completely get rid of everything. But where we've gone now, and we can take a little walk along here, we've now got the library, obviously, which sits here, which is good in a way, because it actually does kind of document some of the history. The archive has got some great bits in it, you know. And then further down here, it's already starting to look a bit shabby, if I'm honest with you. A lot of the generational work they've done here, you know. This is old Beechwood Road. This is where Newton used to park his car when he used to have the old Jaguar.
Oh, down there?
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
he used
there's
to
a
park
plot
it.
up down there.
Yep, the club was just over there, and then we had still a bit shabby some of these buildings. Consider they've all been regenerated, but if we go further down, they moved them here. This is where High Tech and Elvins used to be. They've actually moved them, believe it or not, down here. So they've actually pushed them down. Obviously, it's different people. It's all changed hands a long time ago now, but it tells an incredible story. This was Dalston Police Station. I remember famously, this was the time of real kind of, you know, things had heated up.
Where's the police station? Over there
it
on the
used to be
corner?
right there, the police station. And I'll never forget, at the height of it all going off, it was a whole big thing, and the Daily Mail would come up with the word Yardie. It was started right here, that word. It was created from the papers, yeah. Rankin Dread, the notorious Rankin Dread, used to perform on Cox and Sound System at the Four Aces, and Cook Report, who was a reporter back in the 80s, he accosted him walking along here one day for the microphone, the camera, yeah. As I said, in one of his Cook Report specials on the Yardies. So obviously that created a really bad stigma around the club. If it wasn't bad enough, all the stuff they had to deal with. But when we look now, all the gentrification of all these restaurants that they've now got along here, and this parade, you know, it was just before it was a little clutter of just shops and
it's a different world,
skeleton buildings, yeah,
totally different world.
But the only little sign of history they've left behind was this. They've removed High Tech, so this of course is now for the younger generation of people who've got sound systems and wanting to get bits of kit, so they've got it here. A lot of our ill-spent youth was spent in High Tech, and it's a shame because...
So was that where the High Tech shop was?
No, it's further down. They relocated them after the regeneration of the area. But what's a real pity was they moved Johnson, and where are they going here? I think they closed him down. But this guy used to make the greatest speaker boxes, him and his brother.
What, from this shop here?
They used to recone, yeah. So it was on this corner. They used to recone speakers and sell used equipment. I see they've now gone as well.
Wow, there's a lot of lot of history around here.
A lot of history, incredible history, you know. I remember one day at that police station, one day the police had arrested someone out of the Four Aces, and literally it was never heard of before. They went, a mob from the club went in and steamed the police station, took the keys and unlocked all the cells, and then of course they closed this stand. They moved it all into the monster police station, Stoke Newton police station.
Was that the bigger police station?
That's the giant one they've got now, yeah. So Stoke Newton was the notorious one for, you know, deaths in custody and all the other stuff. Stokey Chokey we used to call it back then. And of course they decided to make it one of the biggest police stations certainly in London. Do you know what I mean? But again, there's a lot of history goes back at that.
Right, we're now at Stoke Newington police station. So tell me about this place. That actually looks quite like a new build.
So this became one of the first super police stations. They tore down the old Stoke Newton police station in 1989, and then they reopened this, I think, in about 91. You know, the history that Stoke Newton police station had, I think it's fair to say, you know, it's been very well documented, the amount of incidents, deaths in custody and various things. But yeah, in terms of notoriety, it's had its, you know, fair share of sort of scandals. There was obviously Operation Jackpot, which was well documented, where I think 45 officers from the station were investigated for planting drugs on people. And obviously there were the deaths in custody. The Colin Roach one was very, you know, it made headlines and caused a lot of uproar when he went into the station and with a gun and took his own life. There was massive, you know, marches and protests and it's always been that way, you know. As I said, over the years, whenever there is a serious incident that occurs in Hackney, Stoke Newton Police Station seems to be the place where everyone sort of congregates and, you know, looks for answers and certainly questions. It did have a bad reputation, particularly for the SPG, you know. The SPG vans were known to, you know, be quite brutal.
But things have changed so much.
Well,
now,
I really think so, yeah, as I said, because things have come a long way, as I said, in certain aspects, not saying corruption and, you know, this stuff doesn't still go on, because it would naturally, but I like to think that they're trying to clean the act up a little bit.
Right, we're on 60 Green Lanes, and tell me about the importance of this place over here.
So this was incredibly important, this, because my dad had a friend, guy called Bill Hill, a West Indian guy, not the Bill Hill to be mistaken with a Billy Hill from West London, the gangster. Billy used to have a paraffin route, and my dad kind of used to supply him with paraffin, and he served a lot of paraffin to a lot of people in the West Indian community. But Billy wanted to open up a club, which would have been probably the first West Indian club in London, and it was right there at 60 Green Lanes. And because obviously there was no way he would have been able to get a music and dance licence, my dad stepped up and became a director secretary on the company for him, which eased him into getting the dance licence. And my mum and dad actually lived in a flat above the club,
60.
which is now a shop now, So this has great significance. Back then, this was the introduction to what would be classified as the very first existence of sound system, the very first existence, you know, the generation on from what they call gramophone parties, which they used to have parties, which again, you know, an interesting theory behind it. They used to use a blue spot gramophone, which was very popular with the West Indians. And, you know, I've got a strong belief that when we refer to blues parties, people say, oh, because you're dancing away the blues. Well, that was an American thing. I think the gramophone parties, which were used with a blue spot gramophone, actually were described as blues parties.
May have come from that.
So I think a strong belief that's where British blues parties came from.
Well, if anyone watching this knows anything different, please let us know.
Because they came onto the back of shebeens, which were Irish, you know, drinking clubs, and, you know, a lot of West Indians called them the early ones shebeens. And I said, but the blues party name, I think, actually revolved from the blue spot gramophone, because we had gramophone parties, you know.
But the name of this place, it was actually called the Pepper Pot, wasn't it?
It was called the Pepper Pot Club.
The Pepper Pot Club.
It was called the Pepper Pot Club, 60 Green Lanes, Haringey.
What year would have that been, roughly, Andy, do you think?
That was my mum and dad were together living there at about 1957, 1956.
Wow, that early.
That early.
So that was where the Pepper Pot.
Yeah, so it you know, it preceded all the other clubs. It preceded the Roaring Twenties. It even preceded the Marquee. I think the Marquee opened in 1961. The only one that existed before them was the Flamingo on Wardour Street opposite Gerrard Street. But the thing was, that at that time was for GIs, the American, you know, servicemen that had come over, and they used to want to listen to the, you know, the R&B and stuff like that. And but that was, well, intents and purposes, the very first West Indian club to play, you know, that genre of music in England.
So once again, really, we need a blue plaque out there.
Blue plaque needs to be out there. Blue plaque all day long.
Incredible history. Yeah, at the moment we're in the ice skating rink, isn't it? Lee Valley.
Yeah, so basically this used to be the meeting point for our warehouse parties. It's a massive traffic jam, and also, as I said, the vehicles, and nothing was off, you know, was off bar. Like, you know, you'd have transit vans packed with people, you'd have old escorts, you'd have people with Mercedes. It was like a bizarre kind of convoy of vehicles. You know,
when people have been, they must have been buzzing, and like they must have had their car stereos turned up.
A lot of them would have actually took their drugs in the car park, you know, awaiting the event, so they wouldn't want to waste time. Once the party they landed, they were all going to be high, ready to go, you know. So as I said, the atmosphere in the car parks in themselves was mad. People would open, you know, the boot of the car with a system in it, and they'd play music. But we used to try to tell them, you know, keep it relatively under control, you know, at the meeting spots, because the last thing we wanted to do was create incidents there. Yeah.
This would have been basically where the convoy would have been coming down, roughly round here, to get to the venue.
So basically what they'd do is, once they sort of left Lee Valley Ice Skating Ring in convoy, the cars then on the back of the flyer, obviously, you know, in the later parties, we got a little bit more advanced and sort of like, you know, started to, you know, give them a direction into it. But the convoy would travel, as I said, all behind the guy on the moped, all the way along here. And you can imagine what it would have been like. So you've got all these thousands of people all heading to the party. They're all going to descend on it. Everyone's in these houses, in their beds, sleeping. Then you've got these massive reels of cars with lights coming through in the middle of the night. You know, all these people got their acid house music playing on their stereos. You know, they're all heading down, all descending on this one spot, the warehouse, you know. So you could just imagine what the atmosphere was literally like. And as they're getting closer to the warehouse, they're closing in on it. Do you know what I mean? The atmosphere was getting more and more and more exciting, you know. It's very, very hard to even to try to start to explain. But what you got to understand was, back here you just had, you know, these old derelict warehouses that were sitting there, and on a Saturday night, we turned them actually into the epicentre of Clubland Britain, because people got to the stage with this particular warehouse where they stopped going into the West End, you know. Example was all the owners, you know, Chris Sullivan from the Wag Club, he used to come down with groups of people, Philip Salon, who's done the Mud Club. All these people would descend on the party. We had celebrities, you know, Boy George, Manny Vanelli had been there, you know, Mark Moore, all the current people from the world of music, fashion, they all came down to Leaside Road. And it was unique because it had a magic, and it was the first time really we saw, you know, those kids from, you know, the suburbs sort of coming down, and they were bringing their kind of their vibe to it. We had all the guys, Street Man from Hackney and Tottenham and everywhere, were all getting in it, but it was, you know, trouble free, besides for a couple of incidents where people tried to, you know, sort of break in to get in there free. You know, it went without problem whatsoever.
Did you have a few people trying to get in for nothing?
Yeah, Jesus, I remember, I think it was it wasn't even New Year's Eve, though, it was the following week. We had a couple of hundred people trying to break in, you know, force their way in through one of the back entries. Remember, it's a warehouse, it's very hard, an old warehouse, it's very hard to secure, you know, because you've got this huge building, you know, and you've got broken windows, you've got all kinds of access points in there. It's impossible, you're not going to be able to, you know, stop everyone. But as I said, it was absolute, you know, madness, but it was a wonderful madness, particularly at that time, because young people, I'm really sad to say, will never experience anything like that again. You know, in their lifetime, they won't.
As we said, it was an absolutely magical time, wasn't it?
It was incredible, as I said.
Pure unity as well, unification.
And the thing is, you know, but people have to understand, I started something very great in Genesis, and you know, by the time you know, I'd got to the stage of, I suppose it was around about March, April, May. By this time now, Genesis were now starting to get, you know, lots of raids, and the magic was leaving what we were doing. And then, you know, you had a great summer come of '89 where, you know, Tony had got his own separate way with Dave, and they were doing huge parties with Back to the Future and Sunrise festivals. You had Jeremy Taylor and Tintin, who were putting on the energy parties, you know, and there were some huge great events as well throughout that the third summer of love really, but it was the second summer of love in everyone's eyes. But you know, those events were absolutely magical. So when Genesis, I started to see it fading out and it started to become very, very messy, I lost the passion to do Genesis. And what I didn't want it to do was for, you know, to carry on and start having events which were going to be, you know, failures, or weren't going to have the same magic that Genesis rightfully had. So, you know, rather than do that, I put a halt to Genesis. You know, in my eyes, it had to stop there. You know, other people then tried to, you know, put on Genesis events, and it became very cheap and very tacky, you know, to the degree people then started, I don't know, selling cheap t-shirts and, you know, little shitty coins and things like that. But all these kind of things were not Genesis. Genesis was about greatness, grandeur, do you know what I mean? And such a wonderful brand, as I said, it was very important for it to keep its integrity in my eyes, you know. But again, I set the bar high, you know, and I expect, you know, if you're going to promote an event, you need to give the public the best it can be.
Well, I can't wait to find it because I'm getting a bit lost. So, we are at the epicentre. So this is where
that is it. Yeah.
The Genesis rave first started on the corner of Mount Pleasant Hill, E5. Is this? When's the last time you've been here?
This is the first. Well, to tell a lie, I came back here to look at it about 2 years ago. But this was absolutely insane. Yeah, this is legendary Leaside Road.
Wow.
Corner of Mount Pleasant.
This is where
so
the
this is
action
our
would have
warehouse.
happened.
This was the warehouse, yeah. So right here, what you're looking at there, 4 stories of complete and utter madness.
That is massive, isn't it?
And you know, every floor was absolutely massive. The downstairs here was just, but it was different. Obviously, the windows were laid along the side. The entrance was obviously there in the middle. Back then, there was none of this was there, obviously, because it was back of nowhere, weren't we? And
that's massive. How many people would this place have held?
This was never ending. We had 8,000 people in here on the week after New Year's Eve, and it just carried on going up because the warehouse, you see, it was going up and up and up. So we'd filled the entire back space. We started with the front part of the warehouse, and then there was a second part behind it, which we then opened up into. So we'd managed to completely fill the ground floor downwards, and then we started to move upstairs. Obviously upstairs was incredibly dangerous. There was holes in the floor and all kinds of stuff like that, but literally, had we had the opportunity to continue, we would have literally filled all 4 floors, and that would have just been insane.
So in terms of sound system, I mean, what are we talking, turbo?
Yeah, we had 2
systems
in there. So we had, in front of us, we had a guy called Hans, who was Tony's sound guy, basically. He had an incredible system. He used to use Martin flare bins, but John McHugh, U2 stage manager, John was also not part of that. He was a friend and close to Tony. He used to come down to the parties. He owned upfront staging, you know, which obviously done all their huge productions, the Joshua Tour and that. So in terms of production, there was loads. And at the back area, that's where we introduced bringing in Mad Hatter's sound system. That, you know, obviously, you know, they themselves were very well known in the area. So, and their bins used to be made by Kurt, which were very similar flare bins to the Martin design. But the system was filled with sound and light. The atmosphere in that place was absolutely unbelievable.
Did you have smoke machines?
Smoke machines. You had a dozen smoke machines in there with apple flavoured smokes. We had lightning strobes. The only thing we never had in there was a laser, but we were going to put lasers in there. They were coming next. We had multiple lightning strobes going through there, fan lights, you know, all variations of lights that were really current. But we'd done the place up. We had nets. We used to get these camouflage nets from Silverman's, which was the army surplus place, you know, up in Stepney. And we put all those there, the parachutes. We used to open up and put those in there as decor. We had a skeleton in there, that a plastic skeleton was blown up, put into a cage.
Did you have dancers and all that?
No, we didn't. People just done their own thing, you know. It was an atmosphere in itself. We had a massive Christmas tree as well that we got from down the road. We put it in there Christmas Eve, and we put little bits of what was the fluorescent paper all over it with the UV light, so it looks amazing. As I said, that sat right in the centre as you came through. We created a tunnel as you came through the doors. We got some big tarpaulin sheets and created a tunnel that you'd walk through into it. And it was just mad. Every day we spent in there with big space heaters doing it up. Patrick, you know, he's not mentioned enough in these kind of things. He was a very much big part of helping us get it all together. Tamara Adair, amazing woman. You know, she was one of the main instigators of the whole scene. If it hadn't been for her, a lot of these people, like Fabio will tell you himself, you know, wouldn't have got the break that he got, and Tony Wilson, you know, because she introduced it all to the West End. You know, she used to be part of, you know, done the door at Westwell, she done the door at Enter the Dragon.
I used to go to Westwell parties, yeah.
She done the door, you know, she was central. So she brought us East Enders into the whole West End thing. And there are other people as well who aren't mentioned, who should be mentioned, you know. The ones that try to, you know, get the mention, the ones that didn't do any work or deserved it, you know what I mean? But these people were the instigators who started the whole bloody thing, you know, with us, and that was good. But yeah, as I said, it was a great building, and it's a historic place to show a blue plaque on that, you know.
Once again, there should be a blue plaque. I can't believe it's still here as well, because a lot of these kind of old buildings have been knocked down now, isn't it?
Well, you see that, yeah, most of them have. As I said, it's done, a lot of renovations been done to it. You can see that because it was turned into the college.
It's a school now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's now into a school.
Leeway School.
But yeah, you know, I'd probably love to come back here and talk one day. I might actually make contact with this school and maybe do a talk on the history of the building.
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
I think it would be amazing, yeah. I think that's definitely one to put in my diary.
But what a great spot. I mean, so was there, obviously you couldn't use lifts, so it was like stairway.
It was mad stairway, but you didn't get to go upstairs. Yeah, I said with the bottom floor, that's where we done the.
So you took out the whole bottom floor.
We took out the whole bottom floor, you know, as I said, and you know, we're working our way up. And there was a story of Tony, the bugger. He was, we had a little office there, space, and Tony being Tony went back and said to one of the partners one day, years later, what he was doing was, when he was getting all his blim bags of money coming, he was craftily taking money and pushing it up and just little hole in the ceiling. And he said the next morning, when he ran back upstairs, there was some mountain of money like that on sitting in the middle. Anyone could have come up there and took it, do you know what I mean, and that, you know? But
that's right, because them days it was all cash, wasn't it? Do you know
all cash.
How did you promote this as well? Was it via like the pirate radio stations?
No, it was clubs. It used to go to the clubs. There was a stream of clubs. There was a Spectrum, which ran on a Monday night. The Future, which was a Thursday night. You had Café de Paris, which was a Wednesday night. You know, you had obviously the Dungeons, which was a Leverage Road at Fred's Fitzroy, and Linden and stuff were doing, and that was on a Friday night. So there were clubs in the scene, you know, across West London, across London. We used to go there meticulously and fly down, friends as well, go out with bunches of flyers and give out flyers when everyone was leaving the venues. Plus we had Jerry and WD at the WAG who'd give all their drivers flyers. So anyone circulating the West End, populating the West, leaving the West End, they'd left the club, they'd be given a Genesis flyer, said they know where the party is. So they'd be taken straight in. So we had a unique ecosystem of building our promotion, which, you know, was unheard of at the time, but it was completely, as I said, original, and it, you know, it lifted the doors. It was undissimilar to what I've been doing with warehouse parties, you know, but it was a step up from blues parties, but it was a step up from that, do you know what I mean? It was like no longer, you know, limiting the flyers and going to record shops, you know, we'd done all that and a million times more, you know. But as I said, it just grew and it grew and it grew, and to me this was Genesis. You know, we've done those parties with Sunrise. There were the Genesis Sunrise events, which set us off in partnership together. And I mean,
Sunrise, was that from the pirate radio? Sunrise? No,
it wasn't. No, so Sunrise was Tony Colston-Hayter. He'd set that up and stuff. You know, he'd started originally done a party with Roger Goodman, which is the Apocalypse now, and he then broke out and done Sunrise. And you know, Sunrise was flagship really. He grew, but Genesis grew beyond Sunrise when we separated. But obviously, after a period of time when we underwent a lot of raids, Genesis started to obviously fall down and Sunrise rose. You know, over that summer of 1989 was when they really, you know, really was electric. You know. But as I said, all these roads were packed with cars. It got to the stage when they finally closed it down because they realised the person who had rented us the warehouse was actually squatting in there. The police were so disturbed by the amount of people going to be turning up. They had a police car and a police car there with police giving out the flyers. So the police was sitting there with big bunches of flyers telling the ravers where the party was going to go, which was another warehouse we'd broken into. Can you imagine that? Do you know what I mean? Just because they didn't want a congregation of people around here, you know, but it was mad. But we had experiences in there like you couldn't imagine. Fire inspector turning up New Year's Eve on the request of the police inspector trying to close us down. He let us carry on, you know. I mean, we had some incidents in there you couldn't even start to imagine, but great memories.
What a time, eh? What a time, yeah, and what an era.
Hackney at its finest, you know. Hackney at its finest.
Well, Andy, I must admit, what an absolute amazing fourth part. And anyone watching this, make sure you check out part 1, part 2, part 3. And what I will say, we need to probably do a part 5, a part 6, and a part 7, because we need to go into the West End
Yeah.
And we need to document the importance of the West End clubs like the Marquee, the Flamingos,
Yeah.
and the
yeah. Roaring 20s.
Roaring 20s, the
Columbus.
Scene,
Yeah.
you know, all these legendary clubs.
Yeah, where it all kicked off.
Where it all
really,
kicked off.
Where it really started.
But yeah, listen, I hope you enjoyed this.
Brilliant, Steve. Great,
listen,
I did so much.
yeah, absolutely incredible.